So I think this video is the video that was sent to me the most. I don't know how you guys find these videos, but they're quite entertaining. Anyway, let's get started.
Is there some kind of creative intelligence behind the universe as we know it? Now, do you see what I have here? A simple example of the millions of flowers that blossom and die every day around the world. Now, I cannot believe how many cretins out there will tell you that there is no scientific basis for thinking that some kind of intelligence created this little flower, much less the universe.
So your argument here is basically, oh look, a flower, it's pretty, therefore a god. Come on man, you've got to think of something better than that. That's like one of the things that atheists make fun of theists for. This exact argument. Don't ignore the fact that science has a completely sound explanation for this kind of stuff. The flower may seem to be designed because of how nice it looked, but design isn't the only way you can achieve something like that. For example, evolution can give the impression of design because of how well it works to pass down favorable genes.
No evidence, they say. No evidence! Who do they think they're kidding? By the way, I don't use terms like idiots or cretins in what I'm saying now just to insult people. I'm talking about real, measurable stupidity.
Well, you better stop talking about yourself then.
I have no doubt that I could find seriously retarded individuals who can see the issues better than what these people see them. And I'm not just saying this about atheists, although they do seem to be the ones with the most inflated opinions of their intelligence.
Time to skip to an actual argument.
A few years ago, a space probe called the Planck satellite discovered that there is an axis around which the entire universe revolves. And at the center of that axis is our solar system, if not Earth itself.
Interesting how you brought up this point. Allow me to briefly go over the background of this. Basically, using the cosmic radio background signature, physicists can map out the significance of the movement of the universe. What occurred appears to be a counter-argument to the principle of relativity. Through some specific ways of thinking, it seems that the universe may revolve around the solar system. Of course, there are plenty of challenges and new evidence that gave alternative explanations. It isn't a consensus among physicists that this is true. But let me get to the topic of God. This is completely cherry-picked in order to make it appear as if the universe was designed. Why don't you focus on, let's say, the question on why God would create such a vast universe and have us live in only a tiny speck of it? Or why did God make the earth revolve around the sun instead of the other way around, especially if he cares so much as to make the entire universe revolve around the solar system? These are questions that are important to answer, but you only bring up the things that support your worldview.
We're not just insignificant specks in an infinite soup of atoms and molecules.
Actually, no matter how you look at it, we are. Even if God created the universe, we'd still be tiny specks in a supposedly infinite amount of matter. Deal with it.
Someone put all of this here, especially for us.
Even if the universe does revolve around the earth, how does that prove that someone created us? It's a huge leap of faith that I suggest you not to make.
So do you know what they called this discovery? This discovery about the entire universe revolving around our solar system? They called it the axis of evil. Why? Why call any discovery evil? They call it evil because for them, the most evil thing they could possibly imagine would be evidence that the whole universe was brought into existence by an intelligence which has, or at least wants to have, a very special relationship with the people here on this planet that we call Earth.
I don't know why exactly they called it the axis of evil, but scientists always make funny names. For example, there's a protein called JAK, and it stands for just another kinase. Oh, and there's a sodium channel in your heart tissue called funny channels. I shit you not. There's always some story behind making these wacky names. For example, the funny channel was named that way because when it was first proposed, everybody laughed at it because of how stupid it was. And then it turned out to be real, so they called it funny channels. The axis of evil, although I don't know the story, I assume it's called that way because of how much it disproves certain hypotheses of physics. And since it served as a problem to their ideas, they called it an evil axis. Now, of course, I don't know the actual reason here, so if anyone wants to look it up, feel free to do so.
Look at this. It's one cell. Just one tiny cell, not from some complex organism, it's from a plant.
So it is from a complex organism.
All the scientists in the world, working for 100 years, could not start with a bunch of simple elements and construct such a living cell.
You don't actually know that. That's a claim that you are making while blindfolded. Can you see the future, my friend? I didn't think so, but here's what I think. Honestly, I think that in the future, maybe not 100 years, but definitely in the future at some point, scientists will figure out how to create a living organism, either artificially or naturally while mimicking early Earth conditions. Of course, I can't see the future either, so we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Even in 1,000,000 years, they could not do it. Let 1,000,000 scientists work for 1,000,000,000 years, making as many Big Bangs as they can imagine, and see if they can create just one little hydrogen atom out of nothing.
The problem here is how you're defining nothing. No scientist is claiming that matter all of a sudden came from absolutely nothing. No, there's always something there. And you creationists keep getting non-matter materials mixed up with nothing. They're not the same. Now that we've cleared that up, matter has been able to pop out from non-matter. Quantum tunneling, my friend. I don't know if scientists have ever tried to do it artificially, but I do know that anti-hydrogen is produced all the time in particle accelerators. So, just because you're ignorant about what scientists do in physics doesn't mean a creator created the Earth.
I'm not talking about playing around with something that already exists in an attempt to alter its atomic composition. I'm talking about Big Banging something out of nothing.
It seems that you're under the false impression that the Big Bang is the beginning event of the universe. That's not the case. The Big Bang is an expansion of space, nothing more. If you want to observe it, just watch the redshift of galaxies. Space is stretching all the time. Now, I'm going to skip a bit of the video here and there since this guy repeats himself quite a bit.
We human beings act like we're gods if we can cut a piece of one plant or piece of one animal and stick it next to a cut in another plant or another animal and watch it grow together.
The only instance of that happening I can think of is during organ transplants in the surgery room, but in no way do we think we're gods for doing it.
We can play games like that with atoms and molecules, genes, strips of DNA and skin and organs, and still, all we're really doing is playing with someone else's Lego set. We cannot truly create anything.
And who told you that we couldn't? From the examples you gave, let's look at DNA and genes. We can create nucleotides out of everyday research in laboratories. The process is pretty complicated, so I'll just leave that to the scientific industries. But all in all, we do this for plenty of lab work, such as for primer design off the top of my head. But I know what you're trying to get at here. You're trying to say that we can't create these from nothing, which is pretty ridiculous. As I mentioned before, we can create antihydrogens from particle accelerators, which may not have been created from absolutely nothing, but then again, we never claimed that anything did. Which brings me to the question of your God. It's silly how you're grilling scientists so hard for not having technology to, for example, build a brand new organism from scratch, but yet you just readily accept the idea that some magic sky daddy popped everything into existence from nothing. Extremely hypocritical if you ask me.
God does, and He has done all the work for us. He made all of the pieces that we play with, and then we have the audacity to say, "But you can't prove there's a God."
Buddy, you keep saying how there's proof of God and you start off with the premise that there's proof, yet you haven't presented any. Your video's titled 100% Irrefutable Proof of God, but so far you've just been mocking scientists. Alright, so why don't you tell me exactly what the evidence there is? You claim that He has done everything for us by creating everything already. What? Where is that knowledge coming from? How do you know? There's no content here that even remotely suggests that there's evidence for that. It's time to stop jumping from one conclusion to the next without taking the proper steps. It's getting a little annoying.
Why, there's more proof that God exists than there is that these stupid scientists exist.
If you honestly think that, then you are beyond hope. There's nothing anyone can do for you now.
Now take a look at this bottle of Coke. Nothing complicated about it. No complex membranes. No mechanical moving pieces. Not a single sign of life. Just a simple bottle of Coke. Mostly water, a bit of plastic, some dyes, and a few chemicals to add flavor. I found it lying in my front yard this morning. My neighbor says someone obviously made it and someone else must have left it there overnight. But I say he has no evidence for that. I choose to believe that what happened overnight was just one of trillions of little bangs that could very easily have made a simple bottle of Coke.
And here we are with the watchmaker argument. Look, the bottle of Coke is fundamentally different in terms of its properties in comparison to nature and the universe. We know Coke bottles are artificially created because we created them. The universe, not so much. We have never witnessed the beginning of said universe. But of course, this isn't the only flaw. In addition to that, even if we could apply this logic, which we can't, we wouldn't be able to say that someone else who wasn't in the initial premise to be the cause of whatever follows that premise. For the Coke bottle, we can say that a person made it, but to immediately use that and claim that an unknown being created object B is way too far-fetched. That is, not only are the two objects in question completely different in properties, but that the subjects doing the creating are also completely different. There's no possible way to make this argument work. I'm sorry, there simply isn't.
They would lock me up if I started seriously arguing against the obvious, dead-set certain evidence, which is that someone was responsible for that bottle's existence, including everything in it.
Well, no, you didn't really have evidence that someone created the Coke bottle. It's only just reasonable to assume a human being created it from the past experiences we had from, I don't know, creating the bottle ourselves. Anyway, I was going to respond to more of the video, but I have simply ran out of time. Maybe I'll pick this up in the future, who knows.